Welcome once again to Making Your Marriage Great. In this session, we're going to talk about dealing with stress. The verse we're going to look at is Song of Solomon, chapter 2 and verse 15. And in this passage, it says, "Catch the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines because our grapes are tender." Now, we'll talk in a few minutes about exactly what it is that verse is talking about, what it means. But as we get started, I want us to realize all families have stress. Every one of them. Families that look perfect, families that look imperfect, they all deal with stress. Now, the question of how you have a successful marriage is how you deal with stress, how you deal with the stressors that are in your life. Some marriages face stress and it tears them down. Other marriages will face the same kind of stress, but it makes them stronger. Stress comes from different sources, financial perhaps, children perhaps, work, money, health, dealing with guilt from previous relationships, deals such as that. There's a lot of different ways in which stress can enter into a marriage. There's two sources of stress, or two types of stress, I guess you could say. One is called developmental stress, and these are stressors that every marriage will face at certain times. There's stress during the wedding. There's stress when you're moving into a home. There's stress with the coming of children. There's stress with an occupational change. There's stress with life changes. You see, these are stressors that happen to almost every family as they mature. So those can be looked forward to. Those can be dealt with because you see them coming. A different kind of stressor is called an accidental stress. When there's a car accident, when someone you love becomes ill or something such as that, when you're going through and there's a job loss and now you have to find out if you need to change careers or if you need to move or what sort of things need to go on with that. Well, how do you deal with stress? I think the first thing we need to look at is you can deal with stress better if you have a good relationship with God. I'm not talking about just going to church. I'm not talking about reading your Bible occasionally or an occasional prayer. I'm talking about a real relationship with God. When you really have a good relationship with God, you learn to cast your cares on Him. You learn to depend on God, and you learn that God will always take care of you in every single situation. In John chapter 14 and verse 27, Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you, not as the world leaves, but I leave that you may have true peace. Let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me." 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7, "Cast your cares upon the Lord because He cares for you." It's important to work on a relationship with God. It's important that both spouses work together in a marriage to create a home where the Lord will stay, where the Lord is there. And in many ways, that foundation will help you to deal with stress. Now, let's look at some ways in which you can deal with stress. First and foremost, the first key to dealing with stress is this: identify where it's coming from. What is it that's creating stress in your marriage? Say you hurt your shoulder. Well, that part hurts, but as time goes on, you're going to hurt in other places of your body as well. And it's not until you take care of the source that all the other parts of your body will feel better. Many times stress is that way in a marriage. When there's a stressor, identify where it's at and see what you can do to reduce it or make it better. If there's financial stress, maybe you can take a step back and create a budget, create priorities for that money to go. If it's a child, of course, you don't get rid of the child, but you recognize the source of stress, and as you deal with those things, you don't let that stress get between you and your wife, between you and other people. You identify where that stress is, and you're able to handle it in that situation. Secondly, a good way of dealing with stress: always remember the commitment that you have with your spouse. You married this person. You love this person. Don't let anything come between you and your spouse. Never allow your spouse to face a problem alone. Be there for them. Don't let anything ever come between you and your spouse. Number 3, check out how you look at stress. Is it a problem? Is it an opportunity? How can we use this stress to make our marriage better? What can we do in this situation to make things work in a better way? Sometimes when we deal with stress, we create memories. Let me give you an example. My parents, when I was growing up, of course, I didn't remember the source of this, but every year at Christmas, they would always, I grew up in West Texas, they would always have a tumbleweed, a small one, somewhere around in the house at Christmas time. And what that was doing is going back to when my parents first married many years ago. They were not able to afford a Christmas tree. They were so poor. Times were really tough. They were just barely scraping by. And so my dad, as a joke, one day brought home a tumbleweed. Those were those big round weeds that would roll around on the ground there in West Texas. He brought home a tumbleweed, put Christmas lights on it, and said, "Honey, this is going to be our tree this year." Well, I think my mother cried when that happened. But remembering where they came from, actually turned out to be something which made their marriage stronger every single year. Perhaps as you look at your stress, you can see it as an opportunity and not always as a drawback. Number four, use your stress to shore up your Christian faith. Realize, I can't make life alone. I can't survive by myself. I need the Lord, and learn to depend on God and upon God's people more and more. And number five, have a good network of friends and family. That's why it's good to attend church, so you can have a network of friends and family who are there for you. You see, we look back at Song of Solomon at the very beginning, chapter 2 and verse 15. It said, "Catch the foxes before they destroy the vines." It's kind of a strange verse there. But here's what it's talking about. When a person would create a vineyard, he would create this area, and it was put together well. The grapes would produce wine eventually. But if he noticed a fox running through there, he had to realize, now fox is there for a reason. Foxes don't eat grapes, but foxes eat the things that eat the grapes. And when you see a problem that's small, it's a lot easier to take care of before that problem gets big. And so that's what that passage in Song of Solomon is talking about. Song of Solomon is about relationships. Take care of problems when they're small before they get big. You see, stress is tough. It raises our blood pressure. It fills our mind. It makes us distracted to where we can't do the things we need to do. And so when you face times of stress in your marriage, you've got to have a high level of commitment to your spouse. You see, your commitment's a pledge. Remember, when you got married, you made a vow to your husband and wife. For better, for worse, for richer, for poor, till this day do us part. Show your love, show your integrity as you work through stressors so that you can keep that vow. Secondly, commitment is not just a pledge, but it's also a promise. You need to tell your spouse, "I'm going to love you no matter what. You're important to me. We wear names. We share intimacy. You matter to me." Thirdly, commitment is a privilege. It's an honor to be married. You chose your spouse. Of all the people of the world, you chose your spouse to marry. And your spouse chose you. It's an honor to be able to be in that marriage relationship. And so we always have to act upon that honor. Don't give up easily. Keep your marriage right in God's eyes. And as we close, I want us to notice this. Your success in marriage will not come because of a lack of problems. Because every marriage will have problems. Success in marriage is not determined by a lack of problems, but is determined by how you deal with those problems. And so deal with those problems in a Christian way. Deal with those problems in a loving way. Deal with those problems in a way that will help you grow and will allow you to not lose what's so very important in life.